The training vessel Argonis drifted silently through the outer ring of the Tava system, its hull casting long shadows against the backdrop of a crimson gas giant. From the outside, it looked like a dormant machine, quiet and indifferent to the stars around it, but inside it was very much alive. Voices barked through corridors, boots slammed against alloy floors, and the rhythm of controlled chaos filled every level. The ship was a crucible for cadets from across the galactic accord, chosen from dozens of species, each hand-picked for combat aptitude, political significance, or in some cases, experimental inclusion. The cadet group designated as Squad Theta 7 had just completed orientation and been assigned quarters near the aft section. It was a mixed team, 5 members total, 2 from the scaled aquatic people of Syrexis Prime, 1 crystalline bio-life form from Polythor Station, a bipedal insectoid from the Zarn Nest Wardens, and 1 human girl from Earth. Her name was Arya Cole. She was the last to enter the sleeping bay, quiet and without expression. She carried a single duffel and wore the standard training uniform, dark gray with high-density weave plating around the chest and forearms. Her movements were efficient, almost automated. No hesitation, no glancing around for approval. She selected the last unclaimed sleeping pod at the far end and placed her bag inside without a word. Her posture was upright, her eyes focused, but emotionless. The others had noticed her the moment she stepped into the hangar earlier that day. Not because she spoke, she hadn't, but because of how she moved. Calm, director, like someone who didn't need to look around to know she was alone. There was nothing imposing about her physically. She was average height, lean, her skin pale, her hair dark brown and braided down the back in a functional twist. But there was something else, something off. She didn't fidget. She didn't blink as often as the others. She didn't ask questions during briefing. During orientation, Cadet Zurek, one of the Syrexians, had leaned toward his fellow aquatic, Talrin, and muttered in a filtered tone only their gill chambers could detect, "Do humans breathe through pride? She hasn't opened her mouth once." Talrin had chuckled, flicking her fins slightly. Or fear, maybe silence is her defense mechanism. But by the time lights dimmed that evening and the ship entered sleep cycle, even the jokes faded. The sleep pods hissed softly as each cadet activated their sleep shields. Crystalline cadets entered low-vibration stasis. Insectoids folded themselves into rest configurations. Syrexians submerged into their personal hydration units. The room darkened into artificial night. Monitors shifted to blue spectrum, but one pod remained open. Arya sat beside hers, legs crossed, hands on her knees, eyes fixed on the floor. The soft hum of the engine beneath the deck provided a low, constant thrum. She wasn't meditating. She wasn't scrolling through a datapad. She was simply awake. An hour passed. Then 2. Cadet Riln, the insectoid, clicked softly in confusion and opened one eye node. He observed her from the edge of his pod, antennas twitching. She hadn't moved, not even shifted her weight. He watched her for 23 minutes before retreating back into rest. Perhaps humans required less sleep, or perhaps she was nervous. He didn't care enough to ask. By morning cycle, the others emerged with groggy blinks and minor stretches. Artificial light brightened gradually to simulate planetary sunrise. The schedule was strict: 3 hours of physical combat drills, followed by low-gravity obstacle training, then squad-based tactical sims in the afternoon. During roll call, the supervising officer scanned each cadet's vitals. Zurek glanced at the readouts. Instructor Vesh, the human's biometric clock shows no stasis activity." Vesh looked up. "Cole?" "Yes, sir," she answered evenly. "Did you not use your pod?" "I stayed alert," she replied. "On purpose?" "Yes." "Why?" "No rest was necessary." Vesh narrowed his eyes but said nothing more. The line moved on. At first, the squad dismissed it. Maybe it was just nerves. First night in a rotating crew, unfamiliar walls, different gravity regulators. Some species took time to adjust. But when the second night came, Arya didn't enter the pod again, nor the third. She sat exactly the same way each night, cross-legged, silent, awake. The shift from amusement to discomfort was subtle but steady. During physical drills, she performed with machine-like consistency, no signs of fatigue. Her breath remained steady, her reflexes sharp. Even her resting heart rate stayed within optimal combat levels. On obstacle courses, she moved like a ghost, efficient, fast, and eerily quiet. During sparring exercises, she never boasted, never grunted, never showed frustration. She just endured. By the fifth night, Talrin had had enough. "You know," she said, standing in the corner with her hydration mask half lowered, "you're making the rest of us look lazy." Arya didn't look up. "That wasn't my intention." "It's a joke," Talrin said, frowning slightly. "It's called humor. You're allowed to laugh. I don't have the energy to waste on things that don't keep me alive." That response silenced the room. Zurek tilted his head. "Wait, so you really just don't sleep?" "I do when necessary," she said. "But necessity is conditional." Cadet Riln, seated upside down on his pod's upper surface, clacked his mandibles in curiosity. "That's not healthy, not even for humans." "It works for me," Zurek scoffed. "What, are you on some Earth supplement? Neuro override? We all have limits." She turned toward him then, not aggressively, just directly. Her eyes met his without blinking. "I passed my limits years ago." The silence that followed was not comfortable. That night, Talrin whispered to Zurek in their private comms, "She's either insane or trained to function without comfort. I've never seen anyone operate this way, not even in Syrexian war pods." "I'm going to check her file," Zurek whispered back. "That's classified." "Not to me. My cousin works Intel Command. I can spoof a clearance key." Talrin hesitated, her gill flaps twitching. "You think she's military?" "I think she's something we weren't meant to see up close." When morning came, Arya stood again without signs of exhaustion, her posture perfect, her responses timed. When she was called into the sim chamber with the rest of the squad, she stepped forward without hesitation. But as she disappeared into the chamber, Zurek remained behind. He activated the wall terminal and began overriding the data lock on her personnel file. What he would find inside would burn through every preconceived notion he had ever carried about her species, and about war. But that would come later. For now, the squad marched on into another simulation, another mock battlefield, another long day, and as always, Arya would face it wide awake. The sixth day began with a full combat scenario deployment in the 0G module of the Argonis. Squad Theta 7 lined up at the chamber's edge, each cadet locking on their stabilizer harnesses. The simulation would test cooperative maneuvers under full disorientation, with artificial gravity randomized mid-exercise. Most cadets were nervous, some muttering, others stretching reflexively. Arya stood at the far left, her harness already sealed, her hands resting behind her back. Her eyes were open and steady, scanning the room in slow, methodical arcs. Instructor Vesh gave the brief with his usual sharp tone, but his voice seemed to dull as cadets shifted focus, not toward his words, but toward her. It wasn't just Zurek anymore. Everyone had noticed. She had completed 5 full rotations of physical training, tactical drills, and combat assessments without once accessing her sleep pod. No stimulant residue was detected in her blood work, no performance lag in reaction time. Her vitals remained absurdly stable, not a single error in her assessments, no symptoms of fatigue, no shift in demeanor. But it wasn't just the lack of sleep that unsettled the others. It was the silence. She didn't speak unless spoken to. When she did speak, it was with precise, clipped clarity. She didn't ask for clarification. She didn't joke. She didn't seem bored. She didn't even fidget. The other cadets couldn't decide if she was suppressing something or if she had nothing to suppress. Talrin had attempted another approach after the 4th day. She had sat beside Arya in the mess hall, placing her hydration tube beside her ration tray. "Some of us talk after drills," Vent things. Helps the nerves. You're welcome to join us. If you ever... I don't talk to release stress, Arya said, eyes still fixed on her protein block. I use silence to keep it controlled. Talrin had blinked, unsure whether to feel insulted or impressed. Now, on the 6th day, the pressure in the squad room was beginning to boil under the surface. The simulation began with a shift in gravitational direction. Cadets launched into the chamber, rotating and stabilizing in real time. Zurek barely caught his grip on the magnetic plate before being flung into the upper dome. Riln tumbled, claws flailing, but corrected himself mid-spin. Talrin hit a panel too hard and hissed softly. Nothing serious, but enough to bruise her pride. Arya didn't tumble. She didn't hit anything. She moved like liquid through vacuum, every step and pull executed with precision. When the gravity failed completely for 17 seconds, she didn't panic. She turned her body into the drift, aimed her boots at the next target ring, and coasted with exact timing to attach. Instructor Vesh's observations, later logged in the system, noted, Cadet Arya Cole demonstrates behavior akin to pre-programmed anticipation. Either she's had access to these simulations prior, or her adaptive timing exceeds expectation. Reassessment of her combat tier advised. After the drill, the cadets returned to the debriefing hall. Arya sat silently, arms folded. Her uniform was unwrinkled, hair perfectly coiled in its braid. She showed no strain, no sweat. Talrin noticed. So did Riln. Zurek finally leaned forward across the bench and whispered, "Does she even blink?" Talrin narrowed her eyes. "She does, just not both at once." "What?" "I watched during drills yesterday. Right eye, then left, alternating, micro-blinks." "That's not natural," Riln muttered, his mandibles twitching. "That's training." The instructor ended the debrief and dismissed the squad. As the cadets walked back to quarters, murmurs began to rise. Not openly, but just under breath, through tight whispers and darting glances. Most cadets had encountered other species they didn't understand, but Arya didn't feel alien. She felt like something just on the edge of recognizable, familiar in appearance, but foreign in practice, and the unknown always bred discomfort. That night, the squad gathered in the common room, a circular space used for rest and informal bonding. The lights were dim, a low amber hue meant to encourage calm. A holographic entertainment module ran a muted sequence of planetary images. Arya wasn't there. "She's not coming," Zurek said flatly. "Maybe she's just introverted," Riln offered, though his tone lacked conviction. "She's more than that," Talrin whispered. "I think something happened to her. Not just combat experience, something worse." Zurek nodded. "I saw the scars. She hides them under the collar seam. Linear pattern across the clavicle. Surgical. Repaired trauma. She's never mentioned Earth," Riln added. "Every other species references their home at some point. She hasn't said a word about her planet." Zurek stood and crossed to the access terminal embedded in the wall panel. He brought up a private console using his officer override credentials, gifted to him by a Syrexian intelligence officer in his family line. With a few coded keystrokes, he bypassed the local training archive and accessed Earth Forces personnel files. Talrin stepped in beside him. "You're violating protocol." "I'm verifying protocol," Zurek countered. Her file appeared. Name, Cole, Arya L. Birthplace, Earth, Sector 3, North American Confederacy. Enlistment, age 16, emergency combat waiver authorized. Assignment, Recon Unit 47, Kestrin 7 Theater. Status, survivor, unit deceased. Remarks, subject reclassified to autonomous operator following final extraction. Post-traumatic combat adaptation identified. Sleep function compromised due to sustained neural rewiring. Adapted to micro-sleep protocols during active threat conditions. Talrin's hand went to her mouth. Zurek scrolled further. A photo appeared, grainy but unmistakable. Arya at 17, thinner, eyes sunken, covered in soot and dried blood, standing alone in a crater, holding the remains of a broken beacon, surrounded by 50 dead. Survivor of Siege 17, last known heartbeat on Kestrin 7 before orbital cleansing. Zurek stepped away from the console. His chest felt cold. "That's why she doesn't sleep," he whispered. "She learned not to," Talrin replied, "because sleep meant death." Neither spoke again that night. Back in the squad quarters, Arya sat in her usual position. Her eyes were open, unmoving. Her breath was steady, her spine straight. She wasn't thinking of the others. She wasn't thinking of the file. She wasn't thinking of Earth. She was remembering the sound of breathing in darkness, someone else's, slowing, stopping. She had been the last heartbeat once, and until she was certain no one else in this squad would become that again, she would not close her eyes. Zurek didn't sleep that night, not because he couldn't. Syrexians were capable of entering low-rest states almost instantly, but because his mind refused to quiet. The images from Arya's file replayed over and over again. The way she had stood in that crater, alone, smeared with dust and dried blood, her eyes fixed on the orbital camera like she wasn't waiting to be rescued, like she never expected to be. He stared at the ceiling of his hydration pod, the blue glow flickering around the edges. He could still hear Talrin's voice from earlier, soft but haunted. Sleep meant death. The phrase burrowed into him. By morning, his tension had calcified into something deeper. Guilt, maybe, or shame. He had broken into her file out of arrogance. He had wanted to prove she was pretending, to show that no one could function like that without cheating the system. Instead, he had found something worse than any simulation the Academy could throw at him: the truth. He emerged early and found her already sitting in the corridor just outside the mess bay, her back straight, hands clasped loosely in front of her. She wasn't meditating. She wasn't eating. She was just alert. Always. "Good morning," he said, trying to sound casual. She didn't respond right away. Then she gave a short nod. "Morning." He hesitated. "Did you eat yet?" "No." "You're not hungry?" "I'll eat when the others are finished." He nodded awkwardly and moved toward the dispenser. His stomach turned as he passed her, knowing what she had lived through. But she didn't seem to expect pity. She didn't even seem to register the attention. Later that day, Squad Theta 7 entered the simulation field for a coordinated search and rescue operation. The scenario involved 2 missing Allied units trapped behind environmental hazards under threat of unknown mechanical hostiles. The squad was to split, coordinate via relay nodes, and extract the targets under timed pressure. Instructors monitored their progress in real time, evaluating not just tactical success, but cohesion under duress. Zurek found himself paired with Arya and Riln for the northern quadrant. Talrin led the southern flank. The crystalline cadet, Voran, remained at the center relay to link both teams. As they moved through the simulated terrain, a labyrinth of low-visibility fog, jagged mineral spires, and magnetic interference, Zurek found himself hyper-aware of her presence. She moved with such controlled fluidity that it almost felt like she wasn't there, not silent, absent. Her footfalls didn't echo, and when she spoke through the comms, her voice was always perfectly modulated. "There's motion at Vector 817, she said. Riln swiveled. "I didn't see anything." "You wouldn't. It's low frequency, human, something rotating. Can't be a drone. Number it's organic." Seconds later, an instructor-triggered surprise attack hit from the left flank, a quadrupedal creature generated by the sim, built to mimic a native predator from Zarn jungles. Riln panicked, slipping behind a pillar. Zurek barely got his shield up. The creature leapt. Arya didn't flinch. She stepped forward and lunged, her entire body snapping into motion like a kinetic coil. She struck the creature's flank, twisted under its midsection, and drove her elbow upward into its core actuator. The simulation sparked. The creature collapsed, inert. Zurek stared at her. "How did you know exactly where the core was?" "I've seen this species in real combat," she said, checking the perimeter. Its weakness is the joint behind the ribs. Mechanical or not, most predators are the same when they charge, vulnerable in transition. You fought this before? Yes. He wanted to ask where, but he didn't. Not yet. They moved forward, clearing their sector. Arya found the first missing unit within minutes, hoisting the simulated cadet, actually a weighted training dummy, over her shoulder without complaint. As they made their way back, a minor detour triggered another trap, a collapsing ceiling and gas dispersal. Arya dropped the dummy, pushed Zurek out of the fall zone, and covered Riln's breathing port with her hand. None of it was rehearsed. All of it was instinct. By the end of the scenario, the instructors had already begun transmitting mid-session evaluations to the commanding officers aboard the Argonis. A single sentence from the senior analyst appeared in the report. Cadet Cole's tactical awareness and battlefield reflexes suggest not only prior field experience, but survival-level combat instinct. Recommend re-evaluation of her training designation. When the team returned to the debriefing room, Instructor Vesh stood in front of the squad with crossed arms. 2 points of extraction were completed. Southern flank retrieved its unit with minimal losses. Northern flank retrieved both and neutralized 3 simulated hostiles. Overall efficiency, 96%. But one cadet, again, demonstrated behavior far exceeding training standard. He looked directly at Arya. Cadet Cole, step forward. She obeyed without hesitation. You broke formation once. You changed course without consulting your team lead. Explain. I followed the indicators and made a decision based on environmental priority, she said. The delay to ask for permission would have cost 2 lives under real conditions. He stared at her, then nodded once. Correct. She returned to her position. No one said anything, not even Zurek. That evening, after meal cycle, Zurek found her again, this time in the empty observation deck. The stars outside shimmered faintly. No simulation chamber, no squad chatter, just the quiet hum of the ship's core. He stepped beside her slowly. I read your file, he said. She didn't turn. I know. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I thought you were cheating or covering something up. I was. He frowned. What? I was covering up what happened. He said nothing. After a moment, she continued. I was part of a recon unit on Kestrin 7. We were deployed ahead of a cleansing campaign. There was an error in the timing. Command thought they had another week. The enemy moved early. My unit was cut off, 23 of us. We lost external support in 3 hours. By the end of the first night, we were down to 11. Zurek's throat tightened. He didn't interrupt. I learned to sleep in 2-second intervals, she said. Micro rest, 1 eye at a time. Half my brain stayed alert. I trained myself to dream with only part of my consciousness active. I didn't mean to. I just did. I had no other option. He swallowed. How long? 6 months. You were alone for 6 months? I buried the last member of my squad in week 4. After that, I stopped tracking time. She looked at him finally, her expression unreadable. You weren't wrong to doubt me. You were wrong to think I was proud of what I became. He wanted to say something, anything, but nothing felt adequate. Not apology, not admiration, just silence. So he stood beside her and watched the stars. She didn't move. She didn't blink. But for the first time since the rotation began, she didn't seem alone, and that was something. The next morning began without alarm, but tension gripped the squad like a second skin. Zurek had told no one what he had seen in Arya's file. Talrin, too, kept it to herself, though her silence was louder than most conversations. Something unspoken now hung between the members of Squad Theta 7. No one dared voice it aloud, but it bled through their expressions, their glances, their awkward pauses in conversation. Arya moved as she always had, methodical, efficient, unflinching. But the eyes that followed her were different. Riln no longer avoided her because she was strange. He avoided her because he didn't know what to say anymore. Vorin, The crystalline cadet who rarely interacted with others had started logging Arya's movement patterns into his tactical analysis journal. He hadn't asked for permission. He didn't think he had the right. In the gravity-modified drill hall, Arya stood at the edge of the mat, waiting for her turn to spar. The room's temperature had been raised to accommodate Voran's crystalline physiology, causing beads of sweat to form on most cadets' skin within minutes. Arya didn't seem to notice. She removed her jacket, stretched her arms once, then rotated her shoulder with mechanical smoothness. "Pairings are randomized," Instructor Vesh announced. "Win by control hold or simulated incapacitation. Injury will result in automatic match pause and medical override." When Arya's name flashed beside Talrin's on the holoscreen, both turned toward each other at once. Talrin stepped forward and removed her hydration regulator, the thin membrane stretching down over her neck like a second skin. Her webbed fingers flexed as she approached the mat, but her movements betrayed no arrogance. If anything, she looked reluctant. "I won't hold back," she said, quiet but firm. "I don't expect you to," Arya replied. They faced each other on the mat, and Vesh gave the signal. Talrin moved first, feinting low and whipping her tail upward, a classic Syrexian maneuver designed to distract and disorient. Arya didn't react to the bait. Instead, she stepped aside half a meter, pivoted, and slipped behind her. Her arm hooked Talrin's elbow, twisting her balance just enough to make her stumble. Talrin recovered and circled again. She launched 2 rapid jabs, aiming for the rib cage. Arya absorbed one, redirected the other, and snapped her wrist downward, forcing a kneel. Talrin snarled, pushed off the mat, and surged upward again, this time with full force. But Arya didn't retreat. She stepped inside the strike, turned her entire body with the momentum, and brought Talrin down in a controlled arc that ended with her knee on Talrin's back and her arm pinning the Syrexian's neck gently but decisively. Vesh called the match. Arya released immediately and stood, offering a hand. Talrin hesitated, then took it. She stood slowly, catching her breath. Her chest rose and fell beneath her pressure-sealed uniform. The others watched in absolute silence. "I thought I had you on that first rotation," Talrin said between breaths. "You did," Arya said, "but your footwork lost control on the push. You extended too far." Talrin nodded once. "I see it now." The rest of the squad continued their matches. Arya sat on the bench, silent, watching every move. When the session ended, Vesh didn't comment, but he did make a note in his console as he left the room. Later that afternoon, the squad was assigned a mission brief: infiltration of a hostile outpost simulator, full stealth, no direct combat unless compromised. The simulation included environmental hazards and a countdown to simulated orbital strikes. The objective: extract data from a central terminal and evacuate to a rendezvous point. Arya was assigned as point, not by vote, but by instructor command. No one objected. The team entered the sim chamber, where a projected facility stood in shadow, long corridors, flickering lights, motion-triggered sensors, and shifting patrol drones. Arya signaled once and moved ahead, body low, her feet barely making a sound against the alloy floor. She took corners at blind angles, her breath slow and constant. Talrin followed behind her, then Riln, Voran, and Zurek, who watched her every movement with quiet intensity. She halted once at a pressure plate and pointed toward a panel high on the wall. "Bypass the lock with a vertical override. The wires are exposed behind the vent casing," she whispered to Talrin. "How do you know that?" Talrin asked. "I've broken into this type of facility before." Talrin hesitated only a second before nodding and getting to work. They reached the central chamber with 2 minutes remaining. Arya moved first again, disabling a drone by throwing a reflective shard from the floor into its sensor lens, blinding it. She then vaulted onto a pipe, balanced by fingertips, and dropped silently behind the server terminal. As the download initiated, Zurek crouched beside her. "You know this isn't just a simulation anymore, right?" "Yes. It feels real because it is for you. She didn't look up. Then do what you need to. But don't distract me again. Zurek nodded and moved into cover. When the countdown reached 20 seconds, Arya gave the signal. The squad exited in formation, sprinting low across the catwalks, ducking beams of simulated fire. One shot hit Riln's shoulder, triggering a pain pulse and bringing him to a stumble. Arya doubled back without hesitation, pulled him up, and carried him to the exit while the others covered them. The simulation ended in success, but Vesh met them outside the chamber with a raised brow. 2 violations of protocol. Cadet Cole deviated from squad formation twice without verbal confirmation. She saved us both times, Talrin interrupted. Vesh looked at her. Noted. He turned back to Arya. Your tactical instinct is flawless, but you act without seeking input. There was no time. Time isn't the only variable in command. Arya stared at him. Sometimes it is. He didn't reply, but he didn't reprimand her either. That night, Arya returned to the observation deck, alone again. She stared at the stars, unmoving, the silence like a second skin. But this time, footsteps echoed behind her. Zurek approached slowly and stood beside her, silent for a moment. You weren't supposed to survive, Kestrin, he said quietly. No. But you did. Yes. I read a report from your commanding officer, he added. He said you refused exfiltration 3 times before finally allowing recovery. Why? I was waiting for a sign that someone still needed me alive. Zurek looked down, unsure how to respond. After a long pause, he said, You know, you scare most of the squad. She turned her head. And you? I don't know yet, he admitted, but I don't think I want you to change. She didn't smile, but her voice softened slightly. I don't know how to change. I only know how to watch. You're not alone anymore, he said. She looked at him fully now, and for the first time, her eyes weren't just alert. They were searching. I know, she whispered, and for the first time since Kestrin 7, she allowed herself to believe it. The ship's artificial night settled across Deck 4 with a low, ambient hum. Blue auxiliary lights traced the edges of walls and door frames like veins, softening the clinical interior. The squad had completed its final integrated trial hours ago, one that combined survival, combat, and rescue under erratic gravitational conditions. The exhaustion was evident in the way the cadets moved, slower, heavier, stripped of all pretense. Muscles burned, limbs trembled, and yet no one complained. Zurek sat alone in the common room, cradling a hydration pouch between his webbed hands. He stared at the floor as if searching for a question he hadn't figured out how to ask yet. Across from him, Talrin lay stretched on a bench, her tail draped off the side, eyes half-lidded in the stillness. Riln sat perched awkwardly on a corner pipe, antennae twitching intermittently. She won't sleep tonight either, Zurek finally muttered. No, Talrin agreed without opening her eyes. Voron's crystalline frame shimmered from a darkened alcove. His voice vibrated softly. She never does. Zurek sighed and set his pouch down. She carried me today. When the corridor collapsed, I should have been crushed. I hesitated. She didn't. Talrin sat up slowly. She doesn't know how to hesitate anymore. It was burned out of her, replaced by reflex. She still shouldn't have done it alone, Riln added, even if she could. Voron's glow intensified briefly. No one's ever told her she didn't have to. No one replied. Across the corridor, beyond the reinforced bulkhead of the sleeping quarters, Arya sat in her usual position, back against the wall near the viewport, legs crossed, eyes wide open. Her gaze pierced through the glass at the stars beyond, but her focus wasn't on them. She wasn't looking for beauty or comfort. She was listening. The silence around her had changed. For the first time since arriving, it no longer felt hostile. It no longer felt like absence. It felt still, like the world around her had finally stopped trying to force her to explain herself. Her body ached. Her uniform still held the faint scent of burning insulation. A bruise had begun to bloom across her right shoulder from where the ceiling collapsed in the last simulation, even though she had told the medic she was fine. She had been worse, much worse. This was nothing. Still, something inside her felt heavier tonight, not from pain, from memory. She blinked once, then shifted her gaze lower, toward the floor. Her breath slowed, nostrils flaring slightly. The back of her mind tugged her toward the memory of dirt, not steel, the smell of blood, not ozone. She tried not to follow it, but it followed her. She reached into her sleeve and pulled out a small, faded strip of cloth. It was dull gray, almost indistinguishable from the training uniform, frayed at the edge, folded tight. She held it in her palm for a long time. It was from Caleb's uniform, the last thing she'd taken before burying him. She hadn't spoken his name aloud in over a year. Her fingers tightened around the cloth. The door hissed open. She looked up sharply, the reflex immediate. But her body didn't move. Her breathing didn't spike. She didn't need to raise her guard. Zurek stood in the doorway, holding 2 sealed rations and a folded thermal blanket. His eyes adjusted quickly to the dark, and when he found her, he stopped. "I figured you'd still be awake," he said quietly. "I always am." "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm here." He stepped forward without invitation, but also without hesitation. He placed 1 ration next to her and handed her the blanket. "You can rest, just for a bit. No drills tonight, no pressure." She stared at the offering without taking it. "I don't rest because I don't trust the room," she said softly. "I rest because I don't trust myself." Zurek sat beside her, cross-legged like she was. He didn't speak right away. After a moment, he said, "You're not the only one who's lost people, Arya. You may have carried more weight, suffered longer, but pain doesn't compete. It just lingers." Her jaw tightened. "You all still close your eyes. Because we've never had to learn not to." She looked at him finally. "Then why are you here?" He tilted his head. "Because someone should be." She held his gaze for a long time. Then, slowly, she leaned back against the wall, the blanket still untouched in her lap. Her hand tightened once more around the strip of cloth. Her breathing slowed, just a fraction. Zurek didn't move. The corridor lights dimmed another degree as the ship shifted into full night protocol. Minutes passed in silence. Then footsteps echoed faintly. Another figure approached, Riln, holding a heat emitter. He placed it down between them and sat near the wall. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Moments later, Talrin joined, sitting cross-legged beside Riln, rubbing the bridge of her nose, exhaling slowly. Vorin followed last, positioning himself just behind the group, his body humming faintly like wind through crystal towers. No one spoke. The room was silent. But Arya didn't feel alone anymore. She unfolded the blanket, pulled it over her shoulders, and sat back once more. Her head tilted against the cold wall. Her eyes remained open, but her grip on the cloth softened. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she had to watch for everyone. Someone else was watching too, not because she asked, but because they chose to, and that was enough.